A warning to our listeners, this episode contains references to sexual behaviour and offensive conduct. Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast series. You are listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan Girl.
We spread like a new disease. You wanna war, but this ain't TV. We come in by forced entry. The mugs from Backwater Brizzy.
Trajce, I want to talk about some cases involving prostitutes and brothels.
Okay.
Now, we're not going to be talking about the morality of prostitution. We're talking about situations where people who have worked in brothels have gone to the courts and said that they've been treated unfairly and they're looking to get a solution in the courts. So in many respects, it's just like any other employment law case or industrial case, but we've got this backdrop, which is an interesting backdrop.
It's an interesting backdrop.
And indeed, and interesting to say morality, and it shouldn't be about morality because we are all equal before the law and each case should be forensically considered based on the facts and on the merits. And it's interesting that there's always some hesitation around conversations, but ultimately, I presume you're going to be talking about a factual case, work-based scenario.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into the discussion about advocating whether or not prostitution be legal or illegal. So we won't go there.
No, that's a morality issue. We're not here for that.
For Trajce, I'm going to take you to the oldest brothel in Australia, the casa.
Casa.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Which state? Where are we?
Casa.
In Western Australia.
WA.
Rightio.
See, I'm surprised it's called a bordello or something, but a casa.
A casa is a house.
Comfortable.
A house.
Bordello.
You know, that's right. It's unusually a Spanish language. Cuesta casa.
Yeah, well, it's a...
Or maybe it was trademarked or something else took it.
I can't say it's a palatial place. I can't say that it looks like a heritage building. It really looks like a set of car parks side by side.
Questa. Was it Questa?
Questa. Questacasa.
I grew
Let's
up.
ask Sara.
I grew up in Arizona and New Mexico as a child, and it was always mi casa es su casa. My house is your house.
Exactly.
Oh, that's obviously what it is. There you are. You solved that problem.
We knew that expression.
So how do you say it again?
Su casa.
Mi casa es su casa.
Mi casa es su casa.
Oh, okay.
Mi casa es su casa.
Here we. All right. So,
Amigo.
And
Cuesta is female.
Oh,
The female house.
Thank you. I just thought I couldn't move beyond until we translated that. So, all right, we have to put context and meaning into all
right.
Seeking,
So,
what you seek, what you look for, your quest.
Yeah, hence the quest. Or was it Kesta or Questa? I wasn't sure with your pronunciation, Alan.
I'm seeking home. Cuesta casa. This is the home that I seek.
all right, so let's take it to Kalgoorlie in Western Australia.
All right.
And at that
Kesta su casa.
At that point in time, running a brothel was illegal, and this was an illegal brothel. And what had happened was the brothel had entered into arrangement with the police on what they called a containment policy. So long as the brothel didn't upset the neighbours, the police left them alone. And part of that was don't drink and don't be rowdy late at night. And don't have any dramas, of course. Now, we see this a lot in the law where the Cuesta Casa had tried to set up a legal structure that was too clever for its own good. And what they'd done was that the owner of the premises, who was known or is described in the court case as Carmel had said that the business arrangement was that she was renting rooms. So she said she wasn't running a brothel. What she was doing is she was renting rooms to independent business people, tenants, and she called herself the landlady.
So this is almost like sometimes hairdressers own a business and they rent out the chairs so that independent hairdressers operate under that chair, right?
Well, closer to home, I was just thinking about the Cougar Town decision. It's not too dissimilar.
No, the Cougar Town decision's very similar. And there in Cougar Town, they described the workers as entertainers. So that was their occupation.
I meant in the contractual relationship
and
arrangement.
In the contractual arrangement, yes, it was very similar as well, renting out rooms.
Okay, Alan, so tell us, so what's happened here?
So in the name of the case is Philippa and Carmel. Philippa being the pseudonym for the working girl, who I'll call a tenant because that's what she was supposed to be, and Carmel, the name for the madam of the establishment or owner of the establishment, who liked to be called the landlady. And what you often see with these innovative business structures is they just haven't wrapped the documentation around it.
Alan, can I just ask, was the working girl, was the term used in the court?
It was.
Yes.
It was.
Thank
Working
you.
girl was used in the court. There was no documentation, and there was a lot of evidence about how the landlady had a lot of control over the behaviour of the working girls. So, for example, there was a reception area where customers would come. They would meet with the landlady. She would organise for them to go to a room with one of the girls. She would collect the money and she would set the price. And then off they'd go. And then if there was any sort of problem that arose out of the business that was being transacted, then she would resolve the problem.
Sounds more like subcontracting as opposed to...
It did a bit. And
leasing room space.
yeah, and there was a big argument in this case about whether or not it was subcontracting. And one of the arguments put by the madam, or the landlady, as she preferred to be known, was that she had no control over what happened in the room. So when the customer went into the room with one of the tenants, they could do whatever they wanted. That was none of her business. And that part of her argument was that the working girls were highly skilled subcontractors, and so they should be recognised as subcontractors because of that skill aspect. It's a fantastic judgment, and it's a very long judgment, but it gives a very detailed analysis. Now, there was a problem with this type of business, which was acknowledged by the courts, which is the tenants would often drink alcohol and some of them took drugs. And the explanation given for that by one of the witnesses was, and I'm quoting from the case, "You cannot take your clothes off in front of a guy and pretend you're all lovey-dovey without a drink." And the importance of that is this is a workplace where drinking was considered to have some level of normality. And again, I'm not going into the morality of it. It's really quite confronting to know that these girls felt they had to drink or take drugs to do their job. But
numb themselves.
To numb themselves, yeah. But the important from a legal perspective was that there was some normality in drinking alcohol.
But so as far as the Philippa is concerned, it's a landlord-tenant relationship.
Well, that's what the landlady wanted everyone to believe. Okay. And then some difficulties developed. Philippa, she was a good worker. She worked surprisingly long hours. I think she worked about 10 hours a day, at least 5 days a week, sometimes more. And she, and I'm not making this up, this is in the case, she developed a bad back. But anyway...
Don't ask us to do a manual task risk assessment here, okay? Just shut around, I need to...
I'm shocked.
Okay.
You're state of shock. Sorry, Trajce. I'm so sorry.
He didn't expect that one.
Well, it gets better, Trajce, because the back injury was so bad she had to take 6 weeks off.
6 weeks off for back injury.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, over those 6 weeks...
I'm still trying to... Where do you find these cases?
But the madam doesn't know what happened in that room and wouldn't have any way to control that work, according to the landlady.
No, but whatever went on in that room, it resulted in a 6-week injury.
Right, okay.
So
now, we've heard about
It could be cumulative injury, it could be sustained.
We've heard about lights being pulled out of the bed heads.
Well, actually, we're on the topic. I don't even know why...
Could be RSI.
I don't know why I'm acting all coy. I don't know why I'm getting all a bit... first of all, where do you find these cases? That's something I'll have to unpack tonight. But secondly, the fact that I'm even really trying to unpack this case, I shouldn't be shocked because in the last season we talked about the public servant and the motel case. So why am I blushing?
And here's somebody doing this as full-time living, right?
I shouldn't have to be because, Alan, you're presenting a case based on facts it's nothing to do with morality. The mechanism of injury and the modus operandi shouldn't come into it. Yet I'm still sort of mentally squirming a bit.
You can't help but think about mechanism of injury in any of these cases.
I shouldn't be shocked because here is a person who wants her day in court.
Yep.
So here you go. Here's another quote out of the case. The work that Philippa did was largely unsupervised, as you would expect, up to the discretion of herself and the individual client, individualistic and subject to her own skills. Now, in a normal workplace, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't allow
It's called autonomy and independence, Alan, I think.
Which is consistent with subcontracting, but not consistent with employment.
Oh, if you don't have a micromanaging boss or like a controlling boss, you're given it, particularly the more you move up the work food chain, you're given a lot more independence and autonomy to make decisions.
Situational leadership. That's right.
Situational leadership. Yep. If we're going to use that exactly. So I'm not sure.
Now it gets a bit more blurred because Carmel, or the landlady, did some things that were good. She, well, depending upon your perspective, so she paid.
So Carmel's the landlady, land person.
Yep.
Carmel's the land person.
She owned the business.
She owned the business, and she would collect rent.
She would. That was her argument, that she was renting the rooms.
Of course.
But she deducted tax and paid tax for the workers.
Now, there we go. Messy employment law issue now.
Yeah, well, it's not consistent with a subcontractor arrangement or a rental arrangement.
Or rental.
No. And then she did something which was sort of a silly halfway point. She paid, she took deductions out of the payment and sent it off on a superannuation scheme for the workers, but didn't make an employer's contribution to the superannuation scheme. So she sort of went halfway. She didn't go all the way.
Yeah. Did she also pay for materials and other, like, uniforms?
Accoutrements?
The case doesn't go into that, surprisingly.
Going through the list?
That's a good question because, that wasn't raised in the case.
I reckon, if we were going to the level of taxation and superannuation, probably would also be pick up supplies, uniforms,
Now, when Philippa hurt her back, she had 6 weeks off and she got free accommodation and meals, but she didn't get paid a salary over that period of time. So once again, she's gone halfway, but not the full way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got the impression it was at the brothel, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Injured her back, time off work, and she's convalescing.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, some tension started to develop between them, and Philippa thought that Carmel wasn't making full contributions to superannuation. Things got messy. She ended up drinking too much, and Philippa made a scene. Then there was a second occasion. She was warned. There was a second occasion where she made a scene, and she was summarily dismissed. Now that was looked at closely in the case.
Can she be dismissed if she's?
And that's the thing. You use the word dismissed. Sarah asks, can she be dismissed? The word is dismissed.
Not as a contractor.
Right.
No, you terminate the contract.
Yep. Or you end the lease agreement depending on what the terms of the lease are, and you give notice to terminate the lease, but you don't dismiss someone if they're not your employee.
Yeah. So the way the judgment went was the judge who wrote a wonderful judgment. The way the judgment went was the judge determined that this was an employment relationship. It wasn't a leasing arrangement.
There you go.
It wasn't a subcontractor. It was an employment. And because it was an employment relationship and because alcohol was tolerated as a normal thing amongst the employees, that it was inappropriate to summarily dismissed. She should have followed a process of warning, allowing Philippa to respond to allegations, and commented that had she responded, there probably would have been a different outcome.
And just to be clear, there is no workers' compensation consideration in any of this case, unlike the Cougar Town decision?
That doesn't come up, but that might have been the driver. I have to acknowledge, one of the things that's very strange about this case is at the end of the case, Judge Ritter awarded 8 weeks' salary, which amounted to $4,300. So just from a practical perspective, it's not really worthwhile going to court for $4,300.
So it's it's only $4,000 over 8 weeks.
Correct.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. Sorry. Okay.
No, only $4,300 over 8 weeks. Yeah, so that was quite interesting. Case runs. Philippa was a hard worker.
So, Trajce, you've just asked about risk assessment in sport. Now, is this a requirement here in this setting?
I think that, when you're looking at any business, doesn't matter what the business is, you have to start with those basic principles of, are we going to have employees, or are we going to have subcontractors? And if you're going to go down the path of contractors, then you really have to do it properly.
It's not as immoral or taboo. I recall a draft, and maybe I'll Google it, maybe someone can find it for us. I have seen, and I've read, I can't remember it too well now, a draft code of conduct for licensed brothel workers and for prostitution, and obviously never made the light of day, but somebody had put that together. And I saw it in the bin, or about to be sort of folded, and I remember thinking, this is curious. So someone has turned their minds to this, and this is, I imagine, in Queensland was during the legislating of licensed venues.
Trajce, did you fish a document out of the bin that was about prostitutes?
No, but
it wasn't in the shredder. It was free.
It was in the shredder.
It was not in the shredder yet. So
I'm rummaging
he
through
fished
bins.
it out.
Look, I'm not looking for the latest news story. No, I'm not going through people's
It was
bins.
stuck in the photocopier.
It was stuck in the photocopier. But I do remember it. The first thing I thought to my mind was, that's fascinating. But actually, the first thing I thought was, how, and getting back to your point, Sarah, how on earth are you going to do a risk assessment for this, right? That was my first.
I don't think it would be that hard, would it?
I get it. Actually, it wouldn't be that hard.
Well, you'd have to do the same thing for a gymnast. There's a real chance of physical injury, and you've got to have limits upon what can be done.
Sanitation, hygiene,
you'd have
health. A safe word. So you've got buttons, etc. So no, you could easily do a risk assessment.
We talked before about a friend who is a stunt person, coordinates the stunts on movie scenes, but and this person is known in industry because they have very good risk management practices. Yep. But I say this, the movie industry has not demanded this of him. He's simply taken it upon himself, having previously been an arborist. Climbing trees and culling trees and whatnot. And so to try and do that, the movie industry is not demanding it, but it is another workplace. And we're seeing this with the Alec Baldwin case, for example. What risk assessments are undertaken and what are the critical, high consequence, material unwanted events. In this case, this is a manual task risk. This woman's presenting with a musculoskeletal disorder.
It's the theme. We're getting back to now sociology. It's just too hard to unpack. We talked about sport before. Sociologically, that's vexed. This issue, vexed. People just like
And movies, don't mess with movies.
Bessie too, it's complicated. It's like, wow, they're doing movies. Have you read the credits? They're getting longer and longer. I just remember Gaffer Boy. What was the Gaffer person? Now you go on with different types of plasterers for different types of sets. So it's complicated.
No matter what, underpinning this, you're talking about the governance of an organization, right? This is what I'm hearing you say is, who are the people making the big decisions, and are they the right people to make those decisions? And then you're going through that list of what are the relationships and who's designing that work, who's executing, who's implementing that work, and is there good communication systems? Are there policies, practices? Are there statements around this? What are their values, beliefs, and ethos? So how are they adhering to that? And who's responsible for decision making, communication, monitoring? At what point is there a stopgap, and are things coming back to report this?
And I think there's a really healthy discussion to be had in any business about, where are we going with this business? What are we wanting to achieve?
That's right. Are we all working toward the same objective? And what are the standards that we accept? What's unacceptable? What are the relationships? What are the boundaries of those relationships? What are the responsibilities within these relationships?
And then how do we get there?
How do we get there, and how do we continue to monitor things when performance is either drifting from what's expected? How do we know what success looks like? Are we just waiting for something to trip up?
But these are uncomfortable topics. These are uncomfortable
in these settings.
But when you get into them, they're no different from any other case.
But people do not want to talk about this. Yet, even if you translate it into straight up ordinary OHSW, we'll add wellbeing principles, it's still orcs. It's still awkward to talk about this stuff.
And the awkwardness comes from something I've been talking to with friends and colleagues in some consulting work now. What's the tribal culture? So there's this invisible, intangible, if you will. What's the tribal culture, and what is the operating rhythm of an organization. And this has come up in the example of sport, in big business movies, or in brothels. What's that culture? You've talked about this, that drinking was permissible, or aggression is permissible in sport, drinking is permissible in the brothel. What's that tribal culture, and what's the operating rhythm of how things kind of expect to go? And this invisibility, if you will, but very, very important stuff that influences practice.
Doesn't fit neatly in,
From
doesn't fit neatly. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan, and if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information, names of cases and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.